All right, so today we're diving into something pretty incredible happening over in Vietnam.
Yeah, it's one of those stories that just grabs you right away, like when we first saw all this stuff coming in about Thich Minh Tech.
It just seemed to explode out of nowhere, right?
Yeah.
I mean, 1 minute, like nobody really outside of Vietnam had heard of him, and then suddenly,
He's all over TikTok, Facebook, everywhere.
exactly. And it's not just the images, it's the whole like debate that started instantly
Oh,
too.
absolutely. Like, is this guy for real? Is he actually a monk?
And what did that even mean, given how he's living like these super intense ascetic practices?
Right, right. It
Yeah.
definitely sparked some strong reactions.
Yeah, you could really see how people were trying to figure out how to even approach this whole thing.
And that's what I think is so fascinating about it, how he became this phenomenon through social media, you know?
Like completely bypassing all those usual
Yeah,
channels.
no endorsements from big institutions or anything. It was just everyday people sharing their experiences.
Which then leads to this really interesting split, right? Like you've got the official Buddhist Church of Vietnam not recognizing him at all.
And then on the other hand, you have the Unified Buddhist Church actually praising him, calling him a true monk.
It really makes you think about how different groups within a religion can have such different ideas about what's legitimate.
For sure. So to really unpack this, I think we need to rewind a bit and look at his background.
Yeah, because, I mean, before he was Thich Minh Thatoor, he was Lean Tu, born in 1981, lived a totally secular life.
Right, like high school military service, even studied forestry, worked as a land surveyor. I mean, talk about a contrast.
A far cry from the walking barefoot ascetic we see now.
Absolutely. So he renounces that life in 2015, becomes a monk, takes the name Minto.
But then even leaves the monastery, right?
Right.
Decides to go his own way.
Yeah, he embarks on the solitary path, and around 2017, he starts these walking pilgrimages.
At first he used buses sometimes, but then from 2020 onwards, it's pretty much all on foot.
Except for the occasional boat, of course, but,
Right. Right, of course, got to cross those rivers somehow.
And that image of him walking, that really became like a symbol in itself.
And then in 2024, his fourth pilgrimage just blows up.
Yeah, thousands of people following him, social media amplifying it all.
It's like he became this accidental internet celebrity overnight.
It got so intense, though, that by June 2024, he had to stop the pilgrimage in Vietnam, at least for a while.
I mean, you had these massive crowds causing traffic jams, disrupting things. There was even a heat stroke death among his followers.
It was just too much, and, his practices themselves were extremely demanding.
Oh, yeah. Thich Minh Tuns was following these 13 Dhutanga practices, which are like incredibly strict ascetic disciplines.
Yeah, I think walking barefoot, only eating food given as alms, owning just 3 robes, eating 1 meal a day before noon.
Bathing in rivers and streams, sitting up in forests or cemeteries. I mean, wow.
He literally renounced all material possessions except for a rice cooker for the alms and some robes made from scraps of cloth.
That level of austerity is pretty mind-blowing in this day and age.
It really is. And it's not like he was focused on giving these elaborate teachings or anything.
Right. His emphasis was always on personal practice, what he called keeping precepts.
He believed that the Buddha had already taught everything essential about Buddhism.
So his path was this lifelong walk for self-cultivation and the well-being of others.
Even his greeting, we have met everyone, has that really simple, direct quality to it.
It's striking how much debate there's been among Buddhist scholars about his approach.
Oh, yeah. Some see his extreme asceticism as this incredibly powerful embodiment of detachment, a real path to inner freedom.
But others question whether it aligns with the whole idea of the middle way in Buddhism.
Which I guess just shows the diversity of thought within Buddhism itself.
But what's interesting is how the public in Vietnam really embraced him.
Yeah, they saw him as the symbol of genuine spiritual devotion, especially when you consider that some religious institutions have faced criticism, you know?
For being too commercialized or whatever.
So he became this kind of counterpoint, and it wasn't just religious devotion either. He inspired all sorts of art.
Yeah, poetry, music, sculpture, painting, fashion, you name it.
It was like this cultural moment.
But then, of course, there's the flip side, right? All that popularity created those social disruptions.
The traffic jams, the crowds, the authorities were worried about potential political exploitation, too.
And of course, it made it harder for him to actually practice his solitary way of life.
All that attention wasn't exactly what he was seeking.
But a lot of people felt like his journey had a really positive impact on society.
Yeah, people talked about feeling more kind, more resilient, even just appreciating the simple things more after seeing him.
Some even called him like therapy for a wounded society, which I think speaks to a real longing for authenticity.
Absolutely. And it's interesting to compare him to other figures in Vietnamese Buddhism like Thich Quang Og or Thich Nhat Hanh.
And then you have these more controversial figures that he's often contrasted with.
It's a complex landscape for sure.
And then there's the whole issue of recognition, right? The official Buddhist Church of Vietnam not recognizing him because he's not affiliated with their temples or monasteries.
Yeah, their spokesperson even dismissed the whole Minh phenomenon, but then you have the Unified Buddhist Church actually praising his conduct.
It really highlights those different perspectives within the Buddhist world.
And we saw that reflected in the scholarly opinions, too. Some saying his alms walk was a normal practice, others pointing to his adherence to Buddhist ideals as the reason for his popularity.
And then there were those who saw him as making a really valuable social contribution.
But then you also have that controversial comparison to Devadatta because of his internet fame.
So clearly a lot of different interpretations out there.
And then in November 2024, he announces his plan to walk to India, the birthplace of Buddhism.
Which is interesting because apparently the idea came from people connected to the government.
That is intriguing.
So he starts his international journey, walks into Laos in December 2024, reaches Thailand early 2025, and keeps going barefoot.
And he was met with a lot of support along the way.
Yeah, people in Laos and Thailand were really receptive.
But things got complicated when he tried to cross into Myanmar because of the civil conflict there.
Safety became a big issue. They even considered alternate routes like going through Sri Lanka first.
But ultimately, he ended up traveling to Malaysia from Thailand since he couldn't enter Myanmar.
And for a while, he had the security guard with him, Mr. Owen Van Bao, a former Vietnamese security officer.
Who handled things like logistics and dealt with the media.
Yeah, apparently he even limited interviews and tried to steer clear of any political questions.
Interesting, but they ended up parting ways reportedly because of disagreements.
So throughout this whole journey, Thich Thut's main focus has always been on those Theravada ascetic practices.
Right, those practices aimed at achieving anatta or non-self and that ultimate detachment.
And it's really important to remember that he's doing all this independently outside the official structures.
He doesn't even identify as a monk or a teacher, just a Vietnamese citizen following the Buddhist teachings.
Which makes the role of social media in his rise even more fascinating.
It's like this completely modern phenomenon of religious influence spreading through these online platforms.
It's really quite remarkable. So we've got this unique figure in contemporary Vietnamese Buddhism gaining massive attention through his extreme asceticism and the power of the internet.
Yeah, it's this incredible contrast. He renounces a secular life for this incredibly intense practice, and it really resonates with people.
Especially when you consider the perception of materialism in some religious institutions.
So you have this widespread public admiration, even though he's not officially recognized.
And I think it points to something deeper, too, this yearning for spiritual authenticity.
Maybe even some disillusionment with those traditional religious structures.
And it really highlights how personal religious practice, public attention, and state oversight are all intertwined.
Yeah, you can't separate them. And of course, there's the increasing influence of social media in all of this.
That's definitely a game changer. So his international pilgrimage continues facing all sorts of challenges, but still receiving that positive reception in other countries.
And the fact that he had a government-connected security escort for a while suggests that the state is definitely paying attention.
It's a story that keeps evolving right before our eyes.
It really makes you think about the complexities of faith and devotion in today's world.
And how these individual journeys can reflect broader societal tensions and aspirations.
It's a fascinating case study in the ever-changing landscape of spirituality.
Absolutely. And we'll have to keep watching to see what happens next with Thich Thut's journey.
Definitely a story that's not over yet.
Thanks for diving in with us today.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll catch you next time on The Deep Dive.
See you then.